There comes a moment, not always loud, not always visible, when something stirs inside you. A whisper beneath the noise of the world, a gentle nudge against the walls you've built. It's not a cry for help, it's a call to remembrance. Not a plea to become something new, but an invitation to return to what you've always been. The real you was never gone, just buried. Buried beneath expectations you inherited. Buried beneath stories you were told. Buried beneath disappointments you never deserved. Like the sun behind the clouds, your true self never ceased to shine, was only momentarily obscured. The soul cannot vanish. It can only be veiled. We have been conditioned to forget. We were taught to listen to voices louder than our own. We were encouraged to trade our truth for approval, our joy for performance, our presence for productivity. And so we buried the softness. We hid the stillness. We abandoned the innocence. Not because we were broken, but because we thought that's what survival demanded. But let me tell you something simple and eternal. You were never meant to live a life of disguise. You were never meant to become a copy of anyone else's dream. You were born in truth, formed in love, and destined for freedom. And though you've wandered far, nothing essential has been lost. The gold is still in you. It has only been waiting for you to remember where you placed the shovel. You are not the names you were called. You are not the roles you perform. You are not the fears you carry. These are layers, masks, echoes. But beneath them lives something eternal and untouched. Something the world did not give you and therefore cannot take away. There is a light in you that predates your pain. There is a wholeness in you that survived the fragmentation. There is a love in you that has nothing to prove. And when you begin to listen, to truly listen, you'll hear the voice of your soul reminding you, I am still here. I always was. We bury ourselves under layers of striving and shame because the ego teaches us that who we are is not enough. It shouts, be more, do more, win more. And so we become performers in our own lives, applauded for the act, yet exhausted from the pretending. The tragedy is not that we forget, we all forget. The tragedy is believing the forgetting is final. But it's not. You are allowed to remember. You are allowed to put down the performance. You are allowed to stop running and sit in your own stillness. You are allowed to say, I miss who I was before the world told me who to be. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of spiritual courage. Healing does not begin when we change. Healing begins when we become honest about where we are. When we say, I'm tired of wearing masks that don't fit. I'm tired of living someone else's life while my own soul waits patiently behind the curtain. You do not need to become anything. You need only to uncover. You do not need to seek what you already are. You need only to see what you have buried. The acorn does not strive to become an oak. It simply surrenders to the truth of what it is. And in that surrender, everything it is destined to be unfolds naturally, organically, miraculously. The same is true for you. Your soul is not interested in your resume. It does not keep score of your failures. It does not measure your worth and productivity. It knows nothing of scarcity or shame. Your soul is interested in one thing, truth. And truth cannot be manufactured, it can only be revealed. So breathe. And in this breath, allow the dust to settle. Feel beneath the performance. Feel beneath the guilt. Feel beneath the should and the should have. Do you feel it? That flicker of aliveness? That is you. The real you, still warm, still awake, still whole. Not the version of you molded by society. Not the version of you that fears rejection. Not the version of you trying to earn worth. but the version that just is. The child who once played without apology, the spirit who once loved without fear, the soul who once trusted without evidence. The real you is not broken. The real you is not confused. The real you is not behind. The real you is free. And all the pain you've walked through, all the betrayal, all the heartbreak, all the disappointment, they did not erase you. They revealed where you stopped believing in your own light. But that light, it never stopped believing in you. There is something holy about reclaiming what you buried. There is something sacred about meeting yourself again after years of pretending. It is the most intimate reunion. The ego will resist. It will panic at the thought of losing control. It will whisper lies to keep you in hiding. But you are not here to obey fear. You are here to dissolve it with awareness. You were not born to live in defense. You were born to live in alignment. You were not born to compete. You were born to connect. You were not born to hustle for worth. You were born worthy. Every time you return to yourself, the universe sings. Every time you say yes to stillness, the divine listens. Every time you dare to feel instead of suppress, you melt another layer of illusion. You don't need more fixing. You need more remembering. You don't need to be taught your worth. You need to unlearn everything that made you doubt it. You don't need a map. You are the destination. And you've been waiting for your own arrival. Keep going inward. Keep digging. Every buried truth is waiting for your permission to rise. And when it does, you'll weep not because you found something new, but because you finally return to what has always been yours. And the beautiful paradox is this. The moment you stop chasing who you think you're supposed to be, the real you comes forth with grace, not effort. There is no struggle in being what is already true. There is only a quiet softening like a flower unfolding to the sun, not because it was forced, but because it was ready. You have been ready longer than you realize. You have carried the keys while believing you were locked out. You have sung the melody of your soul in whispers, afraid someone might hear your joy and judge it. But now is the season of returning. Now is the time for shedding the heavy cloaks of pretending. Now is the sacred invitation to live unburdened by the expectations of others and unashamed of the depth of your light. There is no medal for dimming your spirit to keep others comfortable. There is no reward for betraying your truth in the name of being accepted by people who don't even know who they are. You are not here to be understood by the asleep. You are here to awaken. And awaken you must, not in rebellion, but in remembrance, not in anger, but in peace. Because the real you is not here to fight for identity. It already knows its origin is divine. The real you is not in scarcity, nor confusion, nor desperation. The real you breathes in harmony with all that is. Imagine for a moment that you were never taught to abandon yourself. Imagine that no one ever told you to earn love, to fear failure, to doubt your worth. Who would you be today? You'd be bold, soft, limitless. You'd be unapologetically radiant. You'd be free. But even though the world did teach you otherwise, and even though you did forget, it's not too late. Because what is real cannot be destroyed. Truth may be delayed, but it is never denied. And the soul waits patiently, lovingly, as you remove each mask, each wound, each lie. It waits without judgment. It waits without rush. Because your soul remembers who you are, even when you do not. It's why the ache has never left. Not the ache of loss, but the ache of remembering. That quiet longing you feel, it's not a weakness. It's the voice of truth calling you home. And as you begin to answer that call, not with panic, but with presence, you start to feel life differently. You notice the sacred in the simple. You hear silence not as emptiness, but as clarity. You look in the mirror and see someone you're finally willing to meet, not fix. And that's when it begins. The rebirth. Not loud, not dramatic, but deep. A returning, layer by layer, to the essence beneath it all. You realize that your worth was never up for negotiation. You realize that love was never something you had to win. You realize that your sensitivity was never a flaw, it was your compass. And the more you honor what you used to hide, the more you shine without effort. This is not arrogance. This is reverence. This is not ego. This is alignment. You stop asking, how do I become enough? And start asking, what have I believed that made me forget I already am? And like a snake shedding its skin, you release the roles, the people-pleasing, the striving, the proving. You lay them down gently, with gratitude for how they served you when you didn't yet know your truth. Then you step forward, not into a new identity, but into the space you once feared was too sacred for you to inhabit. This is where you begin to live, truly live, not in reaction to the world, but in response to your spirit. Not from wounded identity, but from remembered wholeness. And you see now that healing was never about becoming something different. Healing was about revealing who was always beneath the pain. The innocent one, the quiet one, the true one. And now you are ready to let that one speak, to let that one breathe, to let that one lead. There will be moments when the old story tries to pull you back. It will tell you you're not ready, that you're not healed enough, that you're still too broken. But listen closely. That voice is not your soul. It's the echo of your conditioning. And echoes may sound real, but they have no substance. They cannot touch you unless you stop and give them meaning. You don't need to argue with the noise. You just need to walk forward anyway, eyes open, heart steady, spirit rooted. And when you do, when you walk with the quiet knowing of your wholeness, life begins to rearrange itself around your truth. You attract what honors you. You align with what nurtures you. You magnetize what speaks your soul's language. This is not magic. This is resonance. This is the law of harmony of the universe. Responds not to what you pretend to be, but to who you actually are. And when who you are is no longer hidden beneath shame, no longer buried beneath fear, you become a lighthouse. Not because you shout, not because you strive, but because you exist fully, freely, and fiercely as yourself. And that is the greatest service you can offer the world, your authenticity. Not a performance, not a projection, but your living truth. Because when you stop hiding, you give others permission to stop hiding too. When you forgive yourself for forgetting, you give others the courage to remember. And when you live with your heart uncovered, you become the healing you once waited for. So let this be your sacred reclamation. Let this be the breath where you say, I am no longer a stranger to myself. Let this be the moment where you stop digging through the rubble of who you used to be and instead rise clean and whole from the silence of your becoming. Because the real you is not waiting at the end of your achievements. The real you is not waiting in the mirror of someone else's approval. The real you is not waiting on the other side of perfection. The real you is now, right here, beneath every false layer, beneath every buried truth, beneath every mask, alive, whole, sacred, and ready. Not ready to chase, not ready to perform, but ready to live as who you were before the forgetting. Because the real you was never gone, just buried. And now, you remember, there is a divine rhythm to awaken in it does not come in a rush, but in ripples. One realization leads to another. One truth uncovers the next. And slowly, your life becomes less about running from pain and more about moving toward presence. You no longer seek escape, you seek alignment. You no longer try to numb the ache, you listen to it. Because now you understand the ache is sacred. It is not a flaw in your design. It is a compass pointing you back to where you buried your joy. And isn't that beautiful? That even in your suffering, there was guidance. That even in your confusion, there was wisdom. You thought you were lost, but you were actually being led. Not away from yourself, but deeper into yourself. The breakdowns, the betrayals, the silent nights, they were not detours. They were doorways. Doorways into depth. Doorways into truth. Doorways into the only thing that ever really mattered, your soul's remembrance. And when the remembrance comes, it does not come with fireworks. It comes with peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need conditions. The kind of peace that says, I no longer need to be someone else to feel worthy. It is a peace born not of control, but of surrender. Not of striving, but of being. And in that peace, you begin to see everything differently. The people who hurt you, they were asleep too. The moments you regret, they were your teachers. The mistakes you made, they were chapters, not definitions. You begin to release the grip. You stop gripping the old narrative. You stop defending your limitations. You stop arguing for the smallness that never fits you. You see, now that your pain didn't make you less, it made you aware. Aware of what you never want to abandon again. Aware of what it means to live truthfully, not conveniently. And so you let go not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. You let go of the people who only knew how to love the mask. You let go of the timelines that were never yours. You let go of the fight to be seen because you finally see yourself. And oh, how holy that is. To see yourself not through the eyes of trauma, not through the lens of performance, but through the gaze of love. You begin to walk differently. Not with arrogance, but with grace. Not with fear, but with reverence. Because you know what it took to get here. You know the darkness you walked through. You know the courage it took to unbury yourself. And so you don't need to convince anyone anymore. You don't need to explain your worth. You simply live it. You embody it quietly, powerfully, authentically. The real you is not loud, but it is radiant. The real you is not perfect, but it is whole. The real you is not finished, but it is free. Free to love without apology. Free to express without fear. Free to create, not to be noticed, but because it brings you joy. And in this freedom, you discover something else. There is no separation between your healing and the healing of the world. Because every time you show up as your true self, you give someone else permission to breathe deeper. Every time you choose peace over performance, you remind others that peace is possible. Every time you stop hiding, you shift the collective story from shame to sovereignty. This is how change happens, not through force, but through authenticity. Not through shouting, but through shining. And the world needs your shine. Not the polished version, not the filtered version, but the raw, real, beautifully human light that only you carry. You are not here to be like everyone else. You are here to be a mirror. A mirror that reflects what is true. A mirror that reminds others of their own light. A mirror that says, look, you never lost yourself. You only stopped looking within. So keep looking within. Keep returning. When the world gets noisy, return. When the doubts grow loud, return. When the pain resurfaces, return. Return to the breath. Return to the now. Return to the place inside you that was never touched by fear, never defined by failure, never dimmed by time. That place is home. That place is where the real you lives. And from that place, everything becomes clear. You don't need to chase what's meant for you. It will find you in your authenticity. You don't need to beg for love, you are love. You don't need to fear the unknown. The unknown is where your soul dances. And as you live from that space, life begins to unfold in divine rhythm. Not always easy, Not always predictable, but always meaningful, always guided, always holy. Because you are no longer walking as someone pretending to be alive. You are walking as someone who has returned, not to a version, but to the original, the essence, the truth, the real you, still here, still radiant, still enough. And now that you've returned to the center of your being, you start to witness the world from a place of calm power, no longer tossed by every opinion, no longer shrinking in rooms that once intimidated you. You realize that nothing outside of you can define the truth within you. That freedom is not found in changing your surroundings, but in transforming the way you see. And now you see with the eyes of the soul. You see through illusion. You see past the masks of others and into the essence they've forgotten too. You no longer crave approval because you recognize the futility of trying to be understood in a language that doesn't speak to your truth. You don't resist that either. You bless it and you let it be. This is the maturity of awakening, not just reclaiming your own soul, but learning how to let others walk their own path without judgment. You begin to understand that everyone is buried in some way. Everyone is healing from something. And so instead of resenting the world, you begin to soften toward it. You move from resentment to compassion, from defense to openness, from why don't they see me to I hope they find themselves too. And that shift, it's nothing short of sacred. You begin to live not as a reaction to the world, but as an offering to it. Your presence becomes medicine. Your authenticity becomes a lighthouse. And you don't need to scream it from rooftops, you simply are, because when you are rooted in the real you, your life itself becomes a transmission, a silent teaching, a quiet revolution of light. And with this, something even more powerful begins to happen. You no longer see your past as a curse. You see it as the soil. You see the pain not as the end of your innocence, but as the beginning of your depth. The things that once made you bitter now make you wise. The wounds that once closed your heart now expand it. You've stopped asking, why did this happen to me? And you've started asking, what did this awaken in me? And that question unlocks the door to your soul. You no longer seek healing from the outside in. You don't chase remedies. You return to the healer within. You trust the divine intelligence in your tears. You listen to your body. You believe your intuition. You treat your triggers not as enemies, but as sacred messengers whispering where more light is needed. And you become gentle, not weak gentle. There is a quiet strength and softness, a profound courage and tenderness. You no longer need the armor because truth doesn't fear exposure. You let others think what they want because their perception cannot alter your essence. You walk unshaken because your peace is no longer negotiable. This is where the real living begins. When you are no longer trying to protect a false self, when you are no longer addicted to performance, when you are no longer imprisoned by the past or obsessed with the future, you begin to live from presence. And presence is not a practice, it is a return. The return to now, the return to simplicity, the return to the breath, the body, the beauty of this exact moment. Because the soul only lives now, and now is enough. Always has been, always will be. When you drop into this moment, the illusion of separation dissolves. You see God in the ordinary. You feel grace in your stillness. You remember that there was never a moment when you were truly alone. You may have forgotten, yes, but forgotten doesn't mean forsaken. You look back at the darkest nights and you no longer curse them. You bow to them because those were the nights you cracked open. Those were the nights the illusions began to fall away. Those were the nights you began to hear the whisper behind the noise saying, "Come home." And you did. Not all at once. Not perfectly, but faithfully. And now, you are here not as a shadow, but as a soul. Not as a role, but as a presence. Not as a reaction, but as a being. You live slower now because you're no longer in a race. You breathe deeper because you're no longer holding your worth hostage. You smile more because your joy is no longer conditional. You give without grasping. You love without losing yourself. You create without comparing. You've dropped the heaviness, the story, the struggle, not because life got easier, but because you remembered who you are. And the beautiful irony is this: what the world told you to hide is exactly what makes you whole. Your sensitivity is not a flaw, it is your gateway to empathy. Your softness is not a weakness, it is your truest strength. Your presence is not insignificant, it is the very space where healing begins. You no longer try to be impressive. You now aim to be honest. You no longer chase meaning, you create it by being fully here. And in that presence, you are guided, not by fear, not by ego, but by something quieter, deeper, more ancient, the wisdom of the soul, the whisper of your divine source, the intelligence of love itself. And this is the moment where everything turns. This is the moment you stop looking outward for proof and start looking inward for peace. This is the moment where you become the parent to the child inside who was waiting all along to be loved without condition. This is the moment where forgiveness isn't something you do, it's something you become. A state of being that flows through you effortlessly because you are no longer interested in carrying what was never yours. You choose freedom. Not later, not when it's convenient, but now. And now again. And now again. Because freedom isn't a destination, it's a decision. A decision to be here as you are and know that it is more than enough. And so we arrive at the sacred edge of remembrance, where everything you once sought outside of you is revealed to have lived within you all along. You were not born to chase love, you are love. You were not created to seek light, you radiate it. You were not sent here to gather pieces of yourself. You were sent here whole, radiant, holy, and merely invited to remember. The real you was never gone, just buried. Under layers of fear that were never yours, under beliefs passed down by generations too wounded to know better, under silence you thought would keep you safe. But safety is not found in hiding. It is found in truth. And truth never asks you to be small. You are not a damaged soul in need of fixing. You are an infinite spirit in need of freeing. You do not need permission to return to yourself. You do not need validation to exist. You do not need agreement to be whole. The only requirement is your yes. A wholehearted yes to presence. A gentle yes to truth. A courageous yes to life as it unfiltered, unedited, unrehearsed. This is where the liberation begins. When you stop trying to be lovable and realize you are love, when you stop trying to prove your existence and begin inhabiting it fully, when you stop searching for God in the sky and remember God has always lived inside your breath, your body, your being, and when this knowing settles in your bones, the world no longer has the power to shape you. You become rooted in what cannot be shaken. Not arrogant anchored, not defensive devoted to the truth of your soul, devoted to the peace that no storm can take, devoted to the sacred path of being fully, fiercely, freely you. You begin to walk in the world differently. You speak with softness and certainty. You listen not just with your ears, but with your heart. You love without needing anything in return because your source of love is infinite. And you stop grasping for control because you understand that surrender is the truest form of power. This is where the ego dissolves not in defeat, but in awe, because the ego cannot survive in the presence of truth. And truth is what you are. You no longer hold resentment because you no longer hold yourself hostage. You no longer repeat the story because you no longer identify with the suffering. You've learned that the wound is not your identity. It is the place the light enters. It is not a mark of failure. It is the sign of initiation. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be present, to weep when the heart breaks, to laugh when joy floods in, to sit in silence when words are not enough, to dance even when no one watches, to love even if it means loss, to live even if it means letting go. Because real living is not about certainty, it's about surrender. And surrender is not weakness, it is the ultimate alignment. It is saying, I trust what I cannot see because I know who I am. It is releasing the story that says, I must control everything, and returning to the sacred knowing I am already held. And you are held by a universe that speaks in synchronicities. Held by a divine presence that has never left your side. Held by the breath that continues moment after moment, asking nothing but your return. So come back again and again. Come back to the sacred now. Come back to your quiet knowing. Come back to your soul. Because no matter how far you've wandered, no matter how long you've been buried, the truth is still waiting with open arms. It is not bitter. It is not angry. It is not impatient. It is still here. Still whole. Still you. And now you are ready not to become something new, but to unbecome everything that was never real. To shed, to release, to return. And in that return, you risen not above others, but above illusion. Not in ego, but in essence. Not in perfection, but in peace. The world may not understand this version of you. Let it not matter. Because understanding is not your mission, embodiment is. When you live as your truth, you are the mirror the world forgot it needed. When you walk as your soul, you are the prayer the world didn't know it had spoken. And when you return to yourself, you return to all. You begin to live not as a separate being, but as an extension of life itself. The trees become your teachers. The stars become your reminders. The silence becomes your sanctuary. And love pure, boundless love becomes your way of being. Not something you give, not something you do, but something you are. You are the love you've searched for. You are the light you've longed to see. You are the peace you once thought was lost. And now you remember fully, completely. Finally, the real you was never gone, just buried. But you, my dear, have risen, and the world will never be the same. There comes a moment, often quietly, when the soul whispers through the cracks of our pretending. It doesn't scream, it doesn't demand. It simply sighs, a long, tired breath beneath the surface, and says, I can't keep performing anymore. And in that sacred breath, life begins. Not the life others have rewarded, not the one that garners applause, but the real one, the one that asks nothing but truth. You were not born to perform. You were not placed here to impress. You came from the divine, not to be decorated by society's ribbons, but to remember the sacredness of your breath, your being, your boundless presence. And yet, we grow up in a theater, not the kind with curtains and stage lights, but one more subtle, more exhausting. The theater of fitting in, the drama of being enough, the act of being who they expect instead of who you are. And the tragedy is we get good at it, too good. We learn our roles so well that we forget they are roles. We smile on cue, we nod when we disagree, we speak when silence is the soul's truth. We become who the world will accept and betray the very spirit that made us alive. We lose the joy of simply being. We bury our spontaneity beneath scripts handed down from generations of unconscious survival. But you are not here to survive in someone else's story. You are here to live in your own truth. Not the truth they taught you, not the one you rehearsed to avoid rejection, but the raw, honest, wild truth of your soul. The part of you that doesn't care if they understand it, only wants to be free. And freedom does not arrive with applause. It arrives in surrender. It arrives the moment you say, I no longer need to be liked in order to love myself. How long will you delay your liberation waiting for permission that was never theirs to give? The world cannot validate what it does not understand. And it will never fully understand a soul that has stopped performing. Because a soul that lives, truly lives, is unpredictable, inconvenient, and powerful. It no longer bows to comfort or expectation. It breathes truth, even when it shakes. There is a sacred rebellion in authenticity. It is not loud. It is not angry. It simply refuses to pretend. It walks into rooms and no longer shrinks. It speaks softly, but with the force of eternity behind every word. It smiles, not to please, but because joy overflows. And sometimes it doesn't smile at all, because realness isn't always cheerful. Sometimes it's raw, sometimes it's tears, but it is always real. And the most spiritual thing you can do is be real. Not perfect, not polished, not put together, just real. You don't have to glow to be divine. You don't have to sparkle to be sacred. You only have to stop abandoning yourself in the name of acceptance, because there is no amount of applause that will fill the void left by your own self-betrayal. That emptiness you feel, that quiet ache, it's your soul knocking on the inside saying, let me out, let me breathe, let me live. And it will keep knocking, not to punish you, but to wake you. Because the truth of who you are has waited long enough behind the mask of who you've performed to be. And the longer you wear the mask, the heavier it becomes. At first, you think it protects you, but eventually, you find it is the very thing suffocating your aliveness. Your life is not a stage. It is a sacred unfolding. And you, dear soul, are not a performer. You are the presence, the light itself, the being behind the act, the witness beneath the mask. You are not what you show. You are what you are when there's no one to show it to. And that self, the one behind the scenes, that is where God lives. That is where peace breathes. That is where freedom begins. Let go of the script. Burn it, if you must. Every line you memorized to be worthy, release it. Every costume you wore to be accepted, shed it. Every scene you reenacted to be safe, step out of it. The stage is not your home. The truth is, and truth does not need lighting or lines or validation. It only needs your permission. And that permission is the most holy act of love you will ever offer yourself. Because the moment you say, I will not perform today, is the moment you return to your center, to the stillness that does not need proof, to the silence that does not need volume, to the self that does not need applause. You return to being. And in being, you remember that all your striving was never necessary because you were already whole. You've spent a lifetime trying to earn a seat at a table you were born to build. You've twisted your light to fit into shadows that never deserved you. And now, the invitation is clear, not to hustle harder, not to prove yourself louder, but to come home. Come home to the self that doesn't audition. Come home to the you that was never a role, never a projection, never a mirror of someone else's need. The you that simply is. And when you arrive there, when you sit quietly inside your own presence without performing, you will feel a sacred unfamiliarity. Not because it is foreign, but because it has been so long forgotten. It is like walking into a childhood home after years away. Everything looks smaller, quieter, simpler, and yet every corner is laced with memory. Every silence pulses with recognition. You realize you didn't need to reinvent yourself. You only needed to stop abandoning what was already true. The universe does not ask you to be impressive. It asks you to be aligned. Life does not reward the pretender. It responds to the authentic. And the authentic does not push it, allows, it does not strive. It flows. When you stop performing, you stop chasing. And when you stop chasing, you start receiving. You begin to experience life not as something to conquer, but as something to receive with reverence and grace. Because life is not a competition, it is a communion, a sacred relationship with the now. And the now is uninterested in who you're trying to be. It wants the real you, the unguarded, unscripted, unmasked presence that breathes without needing to impress, the version of you that would speak the truth even if your voice trembled, the one who laughs without needing an audience, who cries without needing permission, who shows up as they are, not as they're supposed to be. You are not a curated image. You are not a walking resume. You are not a list of achievements or failures or opinions dressed in emotional makeup. You are a living essence, untamed and untouchable, before they told you to sit still and look good, before they taught you to smile even when it hurt, before they convinced you that being you wasn't enough. And every time you remember that, something divine opens within you. You begin to sense it in small moments, the sacredness of not pretending. When you say no without justifying it, when you wear silence like a prayer instead of filling it with explanations, when you walk away not to punish but to protect your peace, when you let people misunderstand you, because truth no longer needs translation. These moments, though quiet, are revolutions, tiny awakenings that whisper, you are finally living, and you are. Because living is not surviving performance after performance. Living is being in such harmony with your own soul that your external life becomes a mirror, not a mask. You stop asking the world what to do next. You start asking your inner being what feels right. And the answers no longer come from noise. They rise like waves from the still ocean within. Can you feel it? That quiet, that truth, that presence within you, it's always been there, waiting beneath the applause, beneath the fear, beneath the hunger to be seen. It is the part of you that never left, the part that watches without judgment, the part that has no need to perform because it is already one with God. And what is God if not the infinite permission to be as you are, to speak from the soul, to move from the heart, to show up without disguise? God doesn't ask you to act worthy. God asks you to remember, you already are. In every breath, in every moment, in every still point of your existence. Worthiness is not something to be proven. It is something to be remembered and lived from. So stop rehearsing. Stop waiting for the perfect timing. Stop shrinking your truth to fit into someone else's idea of success. You are not here to be palatable. You are here to be powerful. Not power in dominance, but power in authenticity. The kind of power that radiates not from effort, but from presence. The power of someone who no longer needs the room to agree before speaking truth, who no longer performs love to feel loved, who no longer betrays themselves to feel safe. Safety is not in agreement. It is in alignment. And alignment comes when you are finally done negotiating your identity for the illusion of belonging. When you realize that peace does not arrive when everyone approves of you, it arrives when you approve of yourself. And that approval comes when you stop editing your soul to meet someone else's expectations. You are not here to entertain. You are here to embody. Embody truth, embody love, embody the deep silence that exists beyond the clamor of opinion. And in that embodiment, you find the paradox. You become more magnetic, more alive, more radiant than any performance could have ever offered. Because people are not moved by perfection. They are moved by presence. There is a kind of holiness in being misunderstood, when you no longer contort your truth to fit into someone else's comprehension, when you say what you feel, not to provoke, not to defend, but simply because silence would be a betrayal of the soul. In this sacred place, you no longer trade your authenticity for approval. You no longer dim your light so others can stay comfortable in the dark. You understand now that not everyone is meant to witness your becoming because some only knew how to applaud your pretending. The deeper you go into truth, the more you shed. Not just masks, but roles, attachments, even identities you once clung to as life rafts. And what you discover beneath it all is this startling simplicity. You never needed any of it. You were never lacking. You were only layered with expectations that weren't yours, burdened with shoulds that never belonged, carrying stories that had nothing to do with your spirit. And in that shedding, you do not become something new. You become what you were before the world told you who to be. This is not an escape. This is a return, a sacred homecoming to the quiet center of your being, the part that does not push, does not seek, does not grasp, the part that watches, that breathes, that knows. Here, there are no performances, only presence, no masks, only essence. And essence is not something you show, it is something you allow. It moves through you, not from effort, but from surrender. And oh, how miraculous surrender becomes when you realize it is not defeat, it is freedom. To surrender is not to give up, it is to give in to the deeper truth of what wants to move through you. To stop performing is to surrender the need to control how others see you. It is to let go of being seen and begin to see clearly, without filters, without stories, without needing the world to reflect back what you already know within. This is the birth of peace, not the peace that comes from a quiet room, but the peace that stays even when the room erupts in chaos. It is the peace of one who is no longer playing roles, but living truth. The peace of someone who no longer rushes to fill silences because they no longer fear being real. The peace of one who can say with softness and power, I am no longer performing, I am simply being. And in that being, something divine unfolds, the way a flower opens not by effort, but by light, the way a river flows not by direction, but by surrender. You begin to live in harmony with the unseen rhythm of your own soul. And that rhythm is not frantic, it is not loud, it is not designed to entertain. It is slow, steady, sacred, like breath, like prayer, like the turning of stars. People may not understand your stillness. Let them not understand. People may not like your honesty. Let them not like it. Because you did not come here to manage their feelings. You came here to liberate your soul. You came here to live with the kind of aliveness that doesn't fit into a neat little box. And sometimes that aliveness looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like tears. Sometimes it looks like dancing with no music or walking away with no explanation. And you begin to see performing was never safety. It was imprisonment. Polished words were not love, they were protection. Sacrificing your truth was not noble. It was self-abandonment. And now you choose something higher. Now you choose presence over performance, truth over safety, wholeness over approval. And in doing so, you awaken something ancient within you, the knowing that says, this is who I've always been, I just forgot. You forgot because the world rewards forgetfulness. It applauds the performance. It sells the mask. But now you remember, and that remembrance is the beginning of everything. You remember that you are not what you do. You are not what they see. You are not even who they love. You are the awareness that watches it all, the presence that animates it all, the silence beneath the sound. And in remembering this, you stop reaching. You stop rushing. You rest instead in your own being. You speak less. You listen more. You show up not as a brand, not as a personality, but as presence itself. You stop editing your laughter. You stop apologizing for your boundaries. You stop tiptoeing around your own needs. Because finally, you understand. Living is not about being agreeable, it's about being aligned. And alignment is not always convenient, but it is always holy. When you stop performing, your relationships change. Some drift. Let them drift. Some deepen. Let them deepen. Because only truth can nurture connection. Performance creates fans. Presence creates soulmates. And you're not here to be famous. You're here to be free. Free to love without fear. Free to speak without rehearsal. Free to live not in reaction, but in creation. Not as an actor in someone else's story, but as the sacred author of your own. The soul does not scream, it whispers. And it has been whispering all along. Stop pretending. Stop adjusting. Stop performing. Start living. That whisper, that ancient breath is the voice of God within you. It is not demanding. It is not condemning. It simply invites. And that invitation, once accepted, changes everything. Because when the soul leads, performance ends, and life, real life, begins. There is something sacred about a life unhurried. A life no longer racing towards some imagined arrival point, no longer grasping for approval like oxygen, no longer tied to the ticking of external clocks. You begin to feel the difference between urgency and purpose. Urgency screams, demands, contracts. Purpose whispers, invites, expands. And when you are no longer performing, you begin to hear that whisper again, soft as breath, strong as eternity, guiding you back to the rhythm of your own becoming. You no longer ask, how should I be? You ask, what is true now? You no longer calculate your words. You no longer strategize your identity. You no longer rehearse your life like a play you hope ends in applause. You show up as you are, moment to moment, breath to breath. And in that simplicity, the miraculous happens. The universe starts responding to your truth instead of your performance. Doors open that striving never touched. People appear who speak to your soul, not your persona. Paths unfold that don't require force, only presence. Because life meets you where you are honest. Not where you're impressive, not where you're polished, where you are real. And being real is a daily act of courage. To show up unmasked in a world addicted to illusions, this is the quiet revolution. This is what spiritual mastery truly is. Not floating above the world, but walking through it with such radical truth that even your silence sets people free. And you will notice it, this lightness that emerges when you're no longer weighed down by performance. You laugh more deeply. You breathe more fully. You cry without shame. You no longer measure your worth in outcomes. You measure it in presence. You feel the sacred in the mundane. You find joy in the ordinary. A walk becomes meditation. A glance becomes prayer. A meal becomes communion. Because nothing is filtered through performance anymore. It is experienced directly, naked, alive. And this aliveness is your true nature. It was never gone. Just buried beneath layers of conditioning, beneath the noise of a world that told you to always do more, be more, prove more. But now you see you don't have to prove light. You are the light. Not the kind that blinds, the kind that warms, the kind that draws others in, not with intensity, but with peace. And when peace becomes your baseline, everything changes. You don't chase love, you become it. You don't beg for belonging. You belong to yourself. You don't force outcomes. You trust timing. You don't hustle for happiness. You embody joy. And all of this sacred shift begins when you stop performing. When you realize that your truth is not too much, that your feelings are not inconvenient, that your presence is not a problem to be managed, it's a miracle to be honored. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop contorting to avoid conflict. You simply breathe fully, deeply, knowing that your aliveness is a gift, not a negotiation. And those who can meet you here, as you are, will stay, not out of obligation, but out of resonance. Because truth is magnetic, not loud, not pushy, just undeniable. And you begin to extend this grace inward to the parts of yourself that once felt unworthy. The tired parts, the angry parts, the scared parts that once wore masks just to survive. You gather them now gently, like lost children, and you say, you don't have to pretend anymore, you're safe here. I'm not abandoning you again for someone else's comfort. And just like that, healing begins. Not through effort, through embrace. Not through performance, through presence. Not through fixing, through remembering. Because you were never broken. You were just acting, playing a part that never suited your soul. And now the curtain falls, not with despair, but with liberation. The lights dim, not with shame, but with surrender. And what remains when the stage is gone, when the script is forgotten, when the applause fades, is you, real, whole, enough. There is a holiness to this return, a quiet sacredness that does not need ceremony, just stillness, just breath, just you sitting in your own presence, knowing there is nothing else to become, only something deeper to be and to remember being. And so we move onward gently, courageously, without armor. We move onward not to finish something, but to sink even deeper into the vast, silent truth that there is nothing left to chase, only more of yourself to allow. You are no longer climbing towards some ideal self. You are descending into the sacred ground of the self that always was. This is not ascent, this is embodiment. You start to see that everything you once feared, losing reputation, recognition, reputation, even relationships, was never the source of your life. They were the echoes of your performance, not the essence of your soul. And now, having shed the act, you can finally stand in the radiant stillness of your own being and say, even if I lose what is not real, I gain what is eternal. You lose the performance. You gain the peace, you lose the illusion, you gain the intimacy, you lose the approval, you gain the self. It is here, in this space, that your healing becomes visible, not dramatic, not theatrical, just present. You begin to walk differently, not faster, not with more purpose, but with softness, with rootedness, as though each step is a conversation with the earth. You speak with less urgency because you're no longer trying to convince. You listen with more reverence because every voice, including your own, holds a piece of the divine. The ego begins to dissolve, not because it was evil, but because it's tired. Tired of the performance, tired of pretending to be in control, tired of trying to earn what the soul already knows is unconditional, and in its place, there is a return to humility, the kind of humility that isn't small or timid, but vast and grounded. The humility of knowing you are both dust and divinity, that you are not here to impress God, but to express God. And that expression needs no polish, only permission. You no longer seek to be seen because you finally see yourself. You no longer seek to be understood because you have made peace with your own paradoxes. You no longer perform gratitude. You become it. Every moment, every breath becomes a silent thank you. Thank you for the freedom of not pretending. Thank you for the courage to be real. Thank you for the pain that cracked the shell of performance and let the truth shine through. And it will shine. Not like a spotlight, but like the slow golden light of sunrise, steady, healing, and beyond effort. You won't have to announce it. Your peace will speak. You won't have to explain it. Your energy will explain it for you. And not everyone will understand this new you, the unfiltered, unperformed, unguarded you. Some will miss the old script. Some will mourn the version of you they could control. Let them. Let them walk their path while you walk yours in truth, in presence, in love. Because now you choose truth even when it's inconvenient. You choose rest even when it's unpopular. You choose depth even when the world celebrates surface. You choose soul even when the ego protests. You choose the long path home instead of the short path to approval. And every time you choose these things, you say yes to life. Real life. Not life as performance, but life as presence. Life as breath. Life as God flowing through you, unfiltered, unedited, unhindered. And you will have moments of doubt. Of course you will. You will feel the pull to slip back into the act, especially when the silence feels too wide, too vulnerable, too unfamiliar. But you will remember, this silence is not emptiness, it is fullness. It is the sound of the soul uncloaked, the sound of God when we finally stop talking over Him. And in that silence, you will be comforted, not by the noise of validation, but by the stillness of knowing. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to understand yourself. You are not here to be consumed by the crowd. You are here to commune with the truth. And you are not here to perform for love. You are here to realize that you are love. And love does not need a role to be radiant. It only needs to be released. So now you live like this, undressed of performance, uncloaked of roles. You wake with no need to prove. You walk without explanation. You speak without fear. And your life becomes a meditation. Not an escape from reality, but a deeper entrance into it. Your very presence becomes prayer. Your being becomes medicine. And without doing anything grand, you start to heal the world simply by no longer pretending. You see now, don't you? You were never too much. You were just too honest for a world that profits from performance. You were never too sensitive. You simply refused to numb what was still alive in you. You were never wrong for wanting to rest, to breathe, to be held without expectation. What the world called weakness was simply your soul choosing presence over pretending. And that presence, your presence, is now no longer something you slip into when the world isn't watching. It becomes your way of life, your baseline, your foundation. You no longer move through the world as a character, but as consciousness itself. No longer shrinking, no longer embellishing, just being, fully, freely. And in that being, you begin to attract not performances, but presence, not fans, but soul family, not transactions, but transformations. The world may never applaud your authenticity the way it claps for your performance, but your soul will. And in the quietest moments when you sit alone and breathe without needing to impress anyone, you will feel it. Peace. A kind of peace that is not earned through effort, but allowed through surrender. It wraps around you like warm light. It holds you like the arms of God. It says, without words, this is who you are. This is enough. You become the safe place you were always seeking, the refuge that doesn't require explanation, the home that welcomes every part of you, the loud, the silent, the strong, the tender. You become whole, not because you finally met the world's expectations, but because you stopped abandoning your own essence. You look back on the years of performing not with judgment, but with deep compassion. You see the younger you trying to be liked, trying to belong, trying to not disappoint. And you hold that version close, Not to keep it alive, but to let it rest. To say, you did your best, but you don't have to keep pretending. We're safe now. We're free. And then you exhale deeply, fully, like someone who has carried a weight for so long they forgot they were even holding it. That exhale, that sacred breath becomes your liberation. No fanfare, no stage lights, just stillness and truth and love. You understand now, you are not here to perform life, you are here to live it. Not to become a character in someone else's story, but to walk boldly in your own. Not to repeat the script you were given, but to write your own pages in ink made of presence. You are here to love, not to entertain, to create, not to conform, to heal, not to hustle. You are not here to fit. You are here to expand. You stop asking, who do they want me to be? And start asking, who am I when I'm not performing? And the answer comes not in grand revelations, but in soft moments, in the way your shoulders drop when you don't have to explain, in the way your eyes soften when you see yourself with love, in the way you stand rooted and relaxed when you no longer need to impress. That is where life begins. Not on the stage, but off it. Not when the crowd cheers, but when the soul sighs. Not in applause, but in alignment. Life begins when you stop performing and start living fully, courageously, divinely. And so I leave you here, not with a conclusion, but with a return. Back to your center, back to your breath, back to the presence that was never gone, only hidden beneath the rolls. The performance is over. The truth remains. Live it. Live it boldly. Live it quietly. Live it fully. But above all, live it as you.